What is up, Evil Dead fans? In this video, we're going to talk about some fit and finish work, the motor piece, and hand room. Now, one guy is asking me when I'm going to do tops, talk about tops. It's probably going to be next week. I'm really trying to wrap this chainsaw up so I can get to the next one, and I got 2 more after that. Those other 3 are halfway done, but I want to get this one done, out the door. And when it comes to the fit and finish and everything fitting perfectly, you have to take a little more time into it, because if one thing's messed up, then the next thing's messed up. There's been multiple times where I've had to rip apart the inside handle because it's just facing the wrong way, or it's too long, or it's just sitting in the wrong position. But I'm gonna cover all that in this video, and next week we'll talk about tops, most likely. So let's get into some of the details on the inside of this and the motor plate. Okay, so when it comes to this chainsaw, this customer wanted as many raw parts as I possibly had. So I took one of Rob's motor pieces and cut it down. So he had plenty of hand room. So if you look inside there, you can see you have Rob's piece inside of here. Now, when I saw the season 1 in person, it looked gritty like this. And it's a very cool look. Let me show the other side. We'll go over some things that happen with motor pieces. Now with this one, you can see how thin it actually is. And I know some people, they use the original motor piece and they cut it down. Some people make molds and stuff like that. This one, you know, is a raw piece, but it has a backing on it here and also a steel support through the middle that bolts on the front all the way to the back over here. Now when it comes to this right here, these are the bolts that hold on the chainsaw. They are actually welded onto that metal bracket on the back. I started doing that with John Thomas's. I used to just do the 2-part epoxy, you know, the industrial stuff. But welding it on kind of alleviates any possibility of any of them breaking loose. Never had that problem using a metal backing, but you know, I want to alleviate those issues if there's any of those possible. And what that also does, it leaves a ton of hand room, because the only thing sticking out is that big piece, and you got your thin piece here. If you look down here, you kind of can't see it now, it's covered up. Right there is the hole where the motor mounted. So you get that much more hand room by getting rid of it. Now, right here is where the bolt for the little flywheel or sprocket, whatever you want to call it, goes. And the reason why I don't put that on before is to put this on. I have my 2 bolts up here, and I actually have a bolt back here. And you can't put that bolt on back here if the flywheel or sprocket is installed. So I have to do that afterwards. And once I install that, I'm going to go over and rubberize it and everything so it doesn't hurt anybody's hands, things like that. When it comes to this gap here, you can cover that up. I don't, because initially the top covers that up, and also you won't see your hand. And also, if you're a person who wants to wear this at a convention for a long amount of time, this will actually get air into the chainsaw, so you're not kind of getting a nasty sweaty hand. So you get a little bit of airflow. And it's something you won't see your hand at all. Once the top's on, there won't be a gap or anything like that. So it's just a little bit of a gap right there to get some air into the chainsaw. Now you can't see the bolt head anymore that connects on the back. Why? Because once that's on, I use the GO2 glue and grit and fill in that seam in the back or the inner side. You can see that there's no seam, and that's how you cover that up. So you better make sure, if you're doing a motor piece similar to this, that it fits in there perfectly and everything seems to be fine and everything's adjusted properly. Especially when it comes to this handle here. One problem that I've had in the past, and some people have, is height. Sometimes it can be too high, sometimes it can be too low. And depending on the size of your hand, you want to make sure the size of dowel that you're going to use. Sorry about that honking, but the size of dowel you're going to use. If you notice back here, I got some white stuff. Now what this is an epoxy. It's a marine epoxy. And it's very, very strong. Sets in about 15 minutes, I think, or a 15-minute work time. I forgot what it is. But it works well with plastic, so that's why I go with the marine instead of, let's say, like the metal to metal kind of stuff, because who knows how much that metal is going to stick. Also, that also covers any kind of inside seam. I remember I talked in the earlier video in the series about gaps here. This actually fills in the gaps. Let's look right here. See it down here. Now what I'm going to do for that is add that GO2 glue, throw some grit in it, let it dry, and then repaint the inside there to cover up any kind of gaps or any kind of anything that doesn't look like it's, you know, well refined and finished. Now I did talk about rounding this out. I did add a piece down here, and I sometimes add milliput on the end here to bring it in a little bit, just because it'll actually fill that area just a wee bit more, and you'll just have to sand that down. So when this is installed, let's put it over here, like that. So you can see it is a little over that edge. So when I put the top on, let's take a look here. There you go. Looks good. So really, if you do something like this, I mean, it's not a long video, I do apologize. But if you do something like this, you get as much hand room as possible. You can't get any more than that, because look how skinny that is. And this is just a sheet of aluminum with a metal bracket on the back, bolted front to back, two-part epoxy here, actually two-part epoxy on the bottom. And you can add it anywhere else to give it a little more strength if you want. And you can also add two-part epoxy to any kind of gaps, depending on whatever motor piece you're using. So you can see you got that hole in the bottom from Rob's original look, and you got these holes that aren't even used, and those are all covered up. And that's pretty much it. So what I'm gonna do, like I said, is, and I didn't say this, but I'll tell you now, but I'm gonna end up painting all this, rubberize it after I put in the flywheel or sprocket, and I'm also going to put in the GO2 glue on the inside of here, spread it out a little bit, throw some grit on it, and fill those in and repaint. So as you can see, we have that bolt put into here. Sometimes you have to cut it down. I cut it down just a little bit so it doesn't scrape the handle. Let's look on the inside here. You can see it still is floating, has a look of it being, floating, not just stationary in the bottom. You gotta make sure there's enough room so where the chainsaw comes on, it doesn't hit it. So you gotta make sure it's a little lower. And that's got some Loctite on it right now. I'm letting all that dry, and then it's gonna be given a little bit of a coat of paint. But that's how you do that. And still gotta put the grit on that one side. But there we go. There's a way to do all that stuff, the inner stuff, and some little details that you can do to cover up gaps and give a nice fit finish. Until next time, you guys stay groovy.